Hey guys, I had a great question about Airtable, what it is, why does it matter? So today in this video, I'm going to talk about why we use Airtable in our firm, and most importantly, I want to talk about what the kind of um, the thought process that goes into how I got here. Okay, and I think that's the most important insight. It's one of the most important takeaways that I've developed over the past several years when it comes to automation technology and automating at a really high level. So it starts with this precept. An automated workflow is limited by and to the extent of the data that it has access to. So how you going to generate that pleading automatically if the automation doesn't know who the parties are? How are you going to send that letter to your client automatically if the automation doesn't know who your client is? How are you going to have your AI respond to your Google reviews automatically if it doesn't know what the review is and doesn't know what to say? So automated workflows, in order to work well, need data. They need the raw material to be able to make the thing happen. We're at a point now in software API connections, tools with like make.com and Zapier and so on, that you can do basically anything that you can possibly imagine. But that workflow, that automated process needs to have the data to be able to do that. So how do you get that data into your automated workflow? Well, there are two ways. You could log in manually to the software that you're wanting to conduct an action on, and you could pull it out and type it in somewhere, or use the native automations within the platform that you're using. Lawmatics, for example, has very, very good native automations in terms of what it can do with its native automation engine. But a lot of the time, your software is not able to do the automation that you want. It's not able, in most cases, to pull data from outside into your tool. So the other way that we get data out of your tools and into your workflow is through the API. What's an API? So an API is an application programming interface. And essentially, this is just a fancy way of describing the ability to send a message to a software tool that will make it take some action, even if you're not logged in and using that software right now. Like, we can send a message to Clio that will tell it to create a new contact or create a new matter. Even if we're not logged into Clio, we can send a properly structured message from outside through its API to make it do that. So that's what an API is. It's an interface for accessing exposed functions within a software. So there's thousands and thousands and thousands of functions inside a software that do lots of different things, and not all of them are exposed to the API. You can't use every function in a piece of software through its API. The developers have to set up those functions in a way that they can be accessed from the outside, right? And so that's what the API does. So you can access the API documentation for any software just by Googling. Like, let's use Lawmatics as an example. If you just Google Lawmatics API documentation, you'll come to this page. And this is meant for developers, but you can see these are all of the folders of different actions you can take. Like, let's go to the Matters and Prospects folder. There are lots of subfolders. So there's lots of information about how matters are structured in the system, the different fields that you can pull. Here's an example API endpoint. So an endpoint is basically just a URL that allows you to execute a function within the software. So here we have the create matter endpoint. It's a post request in the HTTP protocol. Here's the URL endpoint relative to the base URL that you have to call when you're doing these. And here's the authorization that you have to use. So you have to be authorized to take the action in order to access software from the outside. Headers, bodies. So you can see there's lots of information here about how to send. This is essentially an instruction manual on how to send a properly structured API, what's called a call, where we're sending a message to the API for a piece of software to take that action. In this case, it's the create a new matter action, right? But you can see there's dozens and dozens and dozens of different endpoints here that we can take all of these different actions from within the system from the outside through the application programming interface. Okay. So how do you access an API? Well, one way is that you can write software and send these calls in these properly structured format. And you will get back response data, and the system will send you information back that you asked for, assuming you structure your API call correctly. That's one way to do it. You can write your own software. Obviously, you need to know how to code to do that, or you need to know somebody that knows how to code. The other way that you can access an API is through no-code tools like Zapier or Make.com. Okay? Zapier and Make and Pabbly Connect and all these other different softwares, what they are is essentially no-code tools for accessing the APIs that are available within their library. So Zapier has a large library of integrations. You can see as of the time of this filming, they have 7,669 apps that are connected in their app library. Now, and if you click into one, you can see all of the different actions that are available for that app. So, this is the Gmail Zap connection. We have triggers, actions, and you can load more and see more of them. Now, I can guarantee you the Gmail has a lot, and what each one of these is a call to an API endpoint, right? And what Zapier does is they structure all the code for you, and all you have to do is push in the data that you want to send to the system. You don't need to worry about how to structure the call, how to make it look nice, how to make it function correctly. You don't need to worry about authentication, any of that. They take care of all the code part on invisible backend, and you just use their predefined action nodes and triggers that call and respond to the API of Gmail or whatever tool you're using automatically. Okay, and they handle that part for you. Now, that's what Zapier tools like Zapier and Make.com do, is they let you connect to APIs without code, right? And and they've evolved to almost being akin to no-code app development, right? So they allow you to build miniature applications that pull in data from all sorts of different places and make things happen in all sorts of different tools whenever if-then logic applies. So if this thing happens, then I want this to happen, and then this happen, and this happen, and then this happen. So you can do that kind of stuff from within Zapier and Make. So that's the other way that you can access an API. Now, Zapier has lots and lots of tools in its library. Make has fewer, but Make is more powerful and cheaper. And there are lots of things that, that's a whole nother video on what's the difference between the two and why would you choose one over the other. But that's the other way to access APIs, is with no-code tools. Okay? So I want to talk for a minute about the limitations of modern case management software. So the main limitation of modern legal case management software is that most of their APIs suck. They're not fully developed. You can tell that they're allocating most of their attention to making the software better for the internal users of the application, but they're not necessarily that focused on making it easy for their software to talk to other softwares yet. That's another layer of building that most legal tech companies, they don't have the resources to devote to it, or it just isn't a development priority, or they haven't been around long enough. And most of their APIs are just not very good. And I hate to throw Locus under the bus because they're a super powerful application in many, many different ways, but I want to give you an example. This is Locus's API documentation. Okay. You can get a matter. So this is the endpoint for getting a matter out of their system, for returning matter information about a case. And you can see that it fetches the details of a matter with the provided matter ID. Okay. So they don't have any other way in their get matter endpoint to look up the matter. You have to get it by ID. What if you don't have the ID? Got a problem, right? Um, you and we can look at their and you can see that the effects that has in their endpoints on tools like Zapier. Like find a matter. You can look up in here. I'd have to examine the documentation more carefully to figure out how they did this, but their Zapier find matter function only lets you look by name, the matter name. And I'm not sure exactly where that particular endpoint is tucked away here in the documentation, but the point is, what you can use, the input data that you can have to look up a matter is extremely limited. And very rarely in the wild, if you're automating a workflow, are you going to have either a matter's name or its ID handy. There are workarounds where you can like create like lookup tables in like Google Sheets or something, where you can like fetch a row record by any property and then try and work off that. But it's hacky and it's a workaround, and you have to maintain it and set all that up. And it still is going to be limited in many ways relative to some other options. So that's kind of an example of the problem. Now, and I do want to give props. There are legal tools that have pretty good APIs. Clio has a very robust API. Lawmatics has a very robust API. As you can see, you can do a lot of stuff. You can access a lot of data. You can take a lot of actions. You can search. You can return all kinds of stuff from some tools. But the problem is that even for tools that have a good API, like Clio, for example, in many cases, their no-code connectors to tools like Zapier and Make are not super well supported. Now, Clio is one exception. Clio has a pretty good Make connector and a pretty good Zapier connector. But the point is that for most tools, it is very difficult to get the data out of the system that you need, that you want. So to recap, workflows are limited by their access to data. The way we get that data is through the API. The way we access the API is through tools like, in most cases, either a custom code or tools like Zapier and Make.com. Now, for most attorneys who are watching this or who are hiring people, it's generally going to be more economical to develop with no-code tools like Make and Zapier. You can deploy entire workflow applications in an afternoon rather than in months and thousands of dollars, or tens of thousands of dollars. So that's one of the main limitations of modern legal case management software, is that their no-code API connectors are usually not very good, if they have one at all. Most legal tools have no Make.com connector, and I'm a fan of Make over Zapier. That's a different video. But even the ones that do have no-code connectors, in many cases, the actions, they're only a fraction of their endpoints. Lawmatics, for example, has a pretty good API, but their Zapier connector is not very good. It's missing a lot of stuff. It cannot do very much. I wrote a Make.com connector that if you need it, just reach out. I can give you the URL to the Lawmatics Make.com connector. But even that takes a lot of development effort. It's not complete yet. We've got tons of endpoints, but not all of them. You're more limited in what you can do without code. Okay. And even if you can code, in many cases, the APIs are just not good at all, right? They're not accessible at all. So what does this have to do with Airtable, right? To answer that question, first, what is Airtable? And to answer that question, it's easier to start with what Airtable was and what it is today. So Airtable started as a no-code relational database builder. So what is a relational database? A relational database is essentially hiding behind every software tool you've ever used, most likely. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, any legal case management system you've used, for example, is based on a relational database. That's how they connect all the information together. That's how you know that Jim Smith is the lead contact on the Jim Smith real estate matter. And that's how you know that these 5 tasks are connected to the Jim Smith real estate matter. And these time entries are connected to that matter. And this document is connected to that matter. And on the back end, the database is, you can visualize it as a series of tables of information. You have your matters table of all of your matter records, where you might have properties on those records. What's the practice area? Who's the lead contact? What are the documents? What are the tasks? Well, what kind of case is it? What's the statute of limitations? Matter-related properties are stored on matter records. There's going to be a separate table of contacts. Jim Smith, Jane Smith, da-da-da-da-da. Here's their email, phone, address, birthday, date of death, social security number. That kind of information is stored on a contact record that is related to or connected to the matter record. Same deal with tasks, documents, calendar events, and so on. They're all connecting back to a table of matters. So that's how so that's how the data is structured. The data schema. What is it? How are all these pieces of data connected to each other? That's your data schema. And what you have on the front end is the graphic user interface, the portal through which you are able to view and manipulate that data. So the buttons that let me change the person's address, the matter page that lets me see all the contacts and tasks and documents connected to that matter, relevant to that matter. That's how you can view a matter page and see only things connected to that matter, is because there's a relational database on the back end connecting them. So Airtable, fundamentally what it is it allows you to create no-code relational databases. So here's an empty duplicated version of my database. This is what the back end looks like. It gives us a nice interface for looking at table-based databases. And you can structure these in other ways. You can look at them as like Kanban pipelines and stuff like that, and Gantt charts and lists and all that stuff. And that was how Airtable started. Another distinguishing factor of databases rather than spreadsheets is that you can track properties that have a type. So like drop downs where I can select from a list, or I can connect contacts, other records that I can open and see the Jimmy Jones record connected to that. Email, Google Drive is a URL type. So this is a formula property that calculates based on other properties in other fields. So these are properties that have a type and they're connected to each other. So this matters table is connected to the contacts table, is connected to the task table, case notes, assets, documents, and so on. All these tables are connected back to matters, and you can see those properties on here: contacts, documents, case notes, tasks, assets, right? So that is linking to records on other tables. Okay, so this is where Airtable started, no-code database builder. And a couple of years ago, they added the ability, there's automations, and they added the ability to build interfaces. So now what we can do is essentially build our custom application. So now today, Airtable is more of a full stack, no-code application development platform. So you can build your database, but now you can also build the user interface for interacting with the database. So like here's our front-end directory on our case management system that helps help people explore the platform. We have an operations dashboard that shows things like important KPIs, like average time to letters, average time to close in our probate cases, average time to close in short form cases, time to file. And these are all pieces of data that we can track in Airtable. Total cases that are open, stats over time. So these are graphs. So this is all stuff you can build without code, just by drag and drop interface in Airtable. Here's our tasks dashboard, unprocessed mail. So all of our mail also comes into Airtable and is linked to our cases, processed by AI and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's kind of, and then you can look at, you can look at views. Imagine this being filled with tasks. You can look at these kind of different views, and you can look through tabs of tasks or objects or items that are at different phases or different statuses or different points of progress through the case. We have a custom matter page that we built so that we can see all the tasks associated with the case: contacts, documents, assets, creditors. And within each record, we have all kinds of different abilities. Like this is a record for this asset. We can click a button and send a subpoena, send a petition to sell real estate by just clicking a button. If we want to, send a document for certified mail or paper mail or fax, we can do that by setting a recipient and then clicking a button, right? And we can do all those sorts of things. On our documents database, we have, when we're triaging inbound documents, we have a system for tracking, did the mail come in through our virtual digital mailing scanning service? Well, what's the status of it through that service? Do we need to shred that, dispose of it so that we don't have to pay storage fees or anything like that? We can manage all that from here too. And that's all done through the API of all these different tools. Okay. So that's what Airtable is. It's a no-code database builder that now has the ability to build the front end of your application, so you can build customized applications. Why? Why would I bother doing that? And the main reason is that Airtable is almost infinitely flexible. So you can see we can track anything. Like on our case records, I wanted to be able to track assets associated with a probate case. Okay, can't do that in really any legal case management system, which is amazing to me that you can't do that in legal case management systems, but you can't. Like, you cannot modify the database tables in other than maybe FileVine. You can't modify the database tables in any legal case management system. So you cannot track different objects associated with a matter. Like, let's say you wanted to track exhibits for trial and whether they'd been admitted into evidence or not. Can't do it. Well, let's say you wanted to track a witness list of people that you were going to call. Can't do it. You have to do some hacky workaround. Or if you wanted to track the assets, in our case, in estate and planning and probate cases, can't do it. You have to use an independent, more flexible system. So that's reason number one, is it's a lot more flexible. And the other reason, it has an amazing API. So I can pull any piece of data out of Airtable or push it in and have it connected to matters correctly, no matter what piece of input data I'm getting. So, like, for example, we have a lot of automations where we get data from the court. We get an email from the court that contains the case number, which is a unique identifier. And we can pass that through AI, parse the email, and then take actions in Airtable, being able to look up the case. We can use that unique identifier. We don't need the case name. We don't need the case record ID. We can look it up by the case number. We can look it up by anything. We can look it up by any unique identifier. We can look up any record in the system. So let's say all we had was our client's phone number. We could look up the client's record and then use the client's record to look up the matter record, and then use the matter record to look up any tasks, any documents, any other contacts. So we can fetch in any data that you could possibly imagine into an automated workflow. Because remember, an automated workflow is limited by and to the extent of the data to which it has access. So the more data that we can fetch in easily through automated, ideally no-code workflows, the better, right? The more powerful we can make our automations. So that is kind of what Airtable is and why we use it in our practice. There are plenty of other ways to replicate some of the same effect. Again, the better you are in working with APIs, the less important the standalone system is, depending on which platform you're in. There are a lot of industry agnostic tools other than Airtable that are pretty good at accessing data and storing and manipulating and giving that customization. Tools like Smart Suite, Zoho CRM is extremely flexible, and things like that, where you can build a system that fits you like a glove and allows you to automate at an extremely high level. Now, whether and to what extent this will be helpful in your particular practice really depends on what you do, what kind of work you do, how much is process driven versus project driven, meaning how much is the same, how many of your cases are the same or very similar every time, whereas how many of your cases are completely new and different and freeform and bespoke to the needs of that case. Depending on your practice type, the importance of a relational database and well-structured data and automating workflows is going to be more or less valuable. But the point is that this has been a major game changer for us in our estate planning and probate practice. And the reason all comes back to the fact that an automated workflow is limited by and to the extent of the data to which it has access. Hope you found this helpful. Thanks, guys.